Deep in the vast wilderness of the American frontier, where snow-laden peaks kissed the heavens and rivers cut through valleys like silver serpents, there stood a lonely mountain cabin, rough-hewn from logs but sturdy as if it had grown from the earth itself, a dwelling belonging to a man who had chosen solitude over society, silence over chaos, and the raw truth of nature over the false comforts of towns and their gossiping tongues. And that man, known to trappers and passing hunters as Elias Kane, was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair long and darkened with years of sun, his beard thick and untamed, his eyes sharp as a hawk's yet carrying an emptiness that only the mountains understood, for he had once been a soldier, once had a family, and once had dreams of a simpler life with love at its heart, but war had taken, loss had hollowed, and the wild had become his only refuge. Yet even in solitude he never expected fate to knock at his door one fateful winter night when the snow howled like wolves and the wind clawed like ghosts, and as he worked by the fire repairing a trapline with steady hands, he heard it, soft, fragile, desperate, the sound of a woman's voice carried by the storm, "Please, help," and Elias, instinctively gripping the rifle by the door, pushed it open to find a sight that would forever change the course of his days, for there, half collapsed against the drifting snow, stood a woman wrapped in tattered blankets, her dark braids undone, her face pale from exhaustion yet still holding the proud features of her Apache blood, and in her arms she cradled a swollen belly, a child nearly ready to greet the world, her lips trembling as she whispered with tears that froze upon her cheeks, "Can I give birth to my child in your cabin? My tribe, they cast me out, and I have nowhere else to go," and the mountain man, though hardened by years of loneliness, felt his heart seize as though an arrow had pierced it, for her eyes, even in their weakness, carried a fire, a plea not just for survival but for dignity, and without hesitation he swept her into his arms, carrying her inside with surprising gentleness, laying her upon his bed of furs, covering her with heavy blankets, and as he stoked the fire higher, his mind raced with questions. Why would her tribe abandon her? How had she wandered so far? Could she even survive the night? But his voice came out steady as he said, "You're safe here, woman, I'll see you through this storm and whatever else comes," and she looked at him with gratitude mixed with shame, whispering her name. Nayeli, widow of a brave Apache warrior who had fallen under white men's bullets, now cursed by her people for carrying his child alone without the support of a clan, cast into exile as burden and bad omen, forced to walk the wilderness in search of mercy, and in Elias she had found it, though she feared what price would follow. Yet the man only brewed her warm broth, fetched water, and sat by her side, listening to her breathing as if each breath carried more weight than the storms outside. And as the hours passed, their lives began weaving together through stories shared in fragments, his confession that he too had lost his family, her confession that she had prayed to the Great Spirit for one more chance at life, and the fire between them grew not of passion but of humanity, two wounded souls finding shelter in each other's presence. Yet fate was not finished, for the wilderness held dangers beyond storms, and before dawn, as Elias stepped outside to check the trapline, he saw shadows moving among the trees, men with rifles, bounty hunters who had been tracking Apache refugees for coin, and now, in his cabin, lay the very woman they sought, the very secret that would drag him into a battle he had sworn to leave behind, and as Elias returned inside, closing the door quietly, his jaw tightened, his pulse heavy, for he knew what choice loomed before him: protect her and her unborn child and risk his life, or hand her over and live with the shame of becoming what he had always despised. And as Nayeli stirred in the bed, clutching her belly as pain rippled through her, her eyes locked on his, and she whispered through clenched teeth, "You will not let them take my child, will you?" And Elias, with the storm roaring and rifles waiting in the woods, placed his hand upon hers and vowed in a voice steady as the mountains, "Not while I draw breath," and in that moment, the mountain man and the widow bound themselves in a pact of survival, love unborn yet stronger than fear, as the first cries of childbirth began to echo against the log walls, mingling with the storm outside, and the story of two forsaken souls began to rise like dawn over the wild frontier. The night stretched long, and the cabin seemed smaller than ever as Nayeli's cries grew sharper, each contraction tightening the air like the string of a bow ready to snap, and Elias Kane, who had faced bullets and bayonets, storms and starvation, felt his hands tremble as he tried to steady her, for nothing in all his years had prepared him for this moment, not the war that took his family, not the wilderness that tested his endurance, not even the loneliness that had hollowed his soul, yet. Here he was, kneeling at the bedside of an Apache widow, holding her hand as life fought to enter the world while death prowled just outside in the form of bounty hunters waiting for their chance, and as Nayeli's sweat-drenched hair clung to her cheeks, her dark eyes blazed through the pain, whispering prayers in her tongue, begging the Great Spirit to let her child live, and Elias found himself whispering too, though he had long abandoned prayer, muttering rough words to a God he no longer trusted. Let the child live, let her live, and with every push, every scream, he felt the fragile thread between hope and despair tighten, until at last, as the fire flickered low and the wind moaned like wolves outside, the sound broke through, the piercing cry of new life, sharp and sweet, cutting through fear like sunlight through storm clouds, and Elias, his great hands trembling, lifted the tiny child wrapped in fur. A baby boy with skin soft as dawn and lungs that roared against the silence, and he placed the child upon Nayeli's chest, watching her tears flow not of sorrow but of triumph, and she whispered hoarsely, "My son, you will live, no matter what they say, no matter who comes for us," and Elias, though no kin, felt something stir inside him, something he thought long dead. A father's love, fierce and protective, a vow unspoken yet eternal, but time offered no mercy, for even as the newborn nursed, footsteps crunched in the snow outside, voices muttering low, steel clicking as rifles were readied, and Elias rose, pulling on his coat, gripping his long rifle with hands steadier than they had been moments before, and he told Nayeli in a voice deep and firm, "Stay quiet, keep the boy close. And whatever happens, trust me," and though fear shadowed her face, she nodded, for she had seen in his eyes the fire of a man who would not betray, and Elias stepped into the storm, snow stinging his beard, his breath white against the darkness, facing 3 men cloaked in fur and greed, their eyes narrow, their voices sharp, demanding he hand over the Apache woman and her child for bounty, claiming the law was on their side, but Elias came, mountain man, survivor, soldier, spat into the snow and said, "The only law here is the one written by God and the mountains. And she stays with me," and silence fell like a blade, broken by the click of a rifle being cocked, and in that moment, war returned to Elias, the instincts of battle rising in his blood, his stance low, his eyes unblinking, and the fight began like thunder, the crack of rifles echoing through the trees, flashes of fire in the night, men shouting curses, snow erupting with each shot, and Elias moving swift as a predator, his rifle roaring once, twice, dropping 2 men into the drifts, their cries smothered by the storm, yet the third charged, knife flashing, slashing across Elias's arm, blood steaming in the cold, and the 2 men grappled in the snow, rolling, striking, fists breaking against bone, until Elias seized the man's wrist and snapped it with the strength of fury, pressing his own blade to the man's throat, growling, "Go back and tell whoever sent you. This mountain protects its own," and he shoved the man into the storm, limping away with terror carved into his face, leaving Elias bleeding, panting, standing over the dead, and when he stumbled back into the cabin, Nayeli gasped at the sight of his wound, yet before tending it, she placed the newborn in his arms, whispering, he should know the hands that saved him, and Elias, holding the fragile child against his chest, felt tears sting his eyes, for it was as if the boy breathed warmth back into his hollow heart, filling a void left empty for too long, and as Nayeli bound his arm with strips of cloth, their eyes locked, 2 souls scarred by loss yet bound by new life, and in that silence heavy with meaning, Elias vowed, "I will raise him as my own, protect him as my blood, and if you'll have me, Nayeli, I will protect you too, till the mountains themselves crumble," and Nayeli, weary yet radiant in the glow of firelight, nodded, her tears shining like stars, and whispered, "Then we are no longer alone," and so the cabin that once housed only sorrow now held a family, fragile yet unbreakable, bound not by tribe or blood but by love forged in fire and storm, and as dawn broke, painting the peaks with gold, Elias came, the lonely mountain man, and Nayeli, the cast-out Apache widow, began a new chapter not only of survival but of redemption, for together they would raise the child against the odds. Together they would fight whatever world tried to tear them apart, and together they would prove that love, once awakened, could outlast even the wilderness, and to those listening to this tale, let it remind you that no matter how lost or broken you feel, there is always a fire waiting to be lit, a bond waiting to be found, and if you want to hear more powerful stories like this one, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, for your support keeps these tales alive, keeps the fire burning, and brings more stories of love, courage, and hope to your heart.